Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're the first professional football player I've had on the podcast. So I'm super excited to ask you all the football questions.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm excited as well.
Who are you rooting for this year?
So I'm a big Seahawks fan. I had a lot of success there, and they still take care of me. I'm actually going to the game December 15th in Seattle. So I'll be up there in a few weeks when they play the Niners.
Oh, well, I'm a Niner fan, so it's so nice to have you on.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Thanks for joining me.
Right.
Oh my gosh, the rivalry. I won't tell you the nickname that we have for the sea.
I'm pretty sure.
Because of the sea rhymes with rocks.
Yeah.
No, it's all fun and games. Were you playing for them when Richard Sherman was on the team?
Yeah, I was in my fifth year when he was a rookie.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
He made me so mad.
Yeah. Ball player. I do know that.
Yeah, that's right. He is fun to watch on the Sunday morning. He's still a commentator. I forget who he's commenting for.
I think he's doing for Amazon.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I like him a whole lot more now. But yeah, that's a fun rivalry though. Ooh, gets heated.
No, it is. For the longest time, it wasn't really a rivalry because the Niners dominated it all. But
man, the Seahawks have the Niners number now.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. We're doing pretty good this year.
Yeah, it's Pete's a good coach.
Yeah. I heard him on the Dak Shepard podcast, Armchair Expert. Have you ever come across that one?
Yep.
Yeah, he was such a good interview. I didn't know that he was plant-based. He's like vegan.
Yeah, he's like a very enthusiastic person. He's wild, especially it's definitely can be overwhelming when you first experience it. But I mean,
I'm sure.
From the coach that I previously had, who had lost the team, to having Pete end up coming over, it was very refreshing.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I saw that he caught a penalty in a couple of games ago. It's pretty funny. Did you see that?
Yeah, just for being
right?
Yeah.
I've never seen a coach catch a penalty before. So that was fun. We're not actually here to talk about football, oddly enough. I'm a huge fan of football. And so that's why I have lots of questions for you, because I can imagine the exit process being super challenging. And I know you have a story around that, so we'll definitely get to that. But before we jump into it, I like to play a little game called the lightning round, which is actually very slow. So you ready to play? Okay, good. When you first got sober, was there a book that really spoke to you or helped you?
Yeah, so The Four Agreements.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Is a book that really was something that I read, obviously, besides like the big books, right? So
yeah.
Like when you told me that, I was thinking about something outside the big books. So The Four
You
Agreements.
mean this one right here, for those of you looking, not watching YouTube?
You know, and I recommend it to my sober friends and non-sober friends.
Yeah.
I think everybody should read that book.
Man, you know what, really, I have it right next to me because it's in a stack of books that I want to, do maybe a little podcast series on. But I picked it up again because I'm falling into the trap of taking things personally.
Yeah, very easy.
It's a tough one to do. Do you recall off the top of your head, this may be an unfair question, of like, why not to take it personally? I mean, I have my own ideas, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to not take things personally, but that's just one person's opinion of yourself, right? That's not multiple persons
right.
of yourself, right? And I'm a big fan of, if it doesn't apply, let it fly.
Ooh.
If it doesn't apply to me, people can say all these things that they want. They could say you're a bad person. And you're like, well, does it apply to me? No. All right, then see you later. Or, there's multiple things that, but it's kind of a motto that I use. Hey, if it don't apply, let it fly.
Oh, that's awesome, because that was the next question I was going to ask you, which was, do you have a quote or mantra that you live by? I mean, I like that idea. of if it doesn't apply, let it fly. That sort of speaks to the idea of just pausing for a second and just asking, is that really true? Right. I think so often we don't even take a moment to
Yeah,
think about that.
no, definitely. I think it's important, especially if, I think that's something that I've had to change my life from my previous life as a ball player to in an arrogant person, right? To somebody who's like been through a lot and had to suffer through some humility, right? So is the patience, right? Or hearing somebody else's opinion of yourself, right? It's if somebody says, hey, Mike's being arrogant, so I play a lot of like competitive softball, right? And a lot of that translation from the football field to the softball field, you don't get the best person in a competitive atmosphere, right? So there's times where I may act out or do something in particular doesn't exactly meet up with my morals. So somebody says, hey, Mike, you're being arrogant. You sit and process that. And you're like, man, I was being arrogant. So that's something that you need to fix internally, right? And then you can go make amends to that person or go make amends to those people. Humble yourself a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and then if I wasn't being arrogant in the situation and it didn't apply, oh well.
That's so interesting because, I don't know you real well, but we had a nice chat before we scheduled the interview, and you strike me as a very humble person. So, if you're saying that you used to be arrogant or had a tendency, it seems like the work you're doing is working.
Yeah, I mean, when you go from in a very short period of time, you go from, like you said, being a professional football player to within 3 years losing everything, and then showing up to your last treatment center with 2 bags, right? One full of clothes, one full of shoes, and then having to leave there, getting food stamps, wasn't able to get a bank account, literally had nothing. I sold my house, I sold my cars. Was going through a divorce at the time. And, luckily, my wife was able to find sobriety, and, we were able to slow things down a little bit, which is something we can touch on later, but because it has a lot to do with recovery and learning and everything, listening to my sponsor, having to humble yourself and listen to somebody else for a change when, like I said, I had that ego, and, nobody could tell me anything because of who I was, what I did. That's 0.001% of the population. I felt like I was untouchable. So that when I speak of like the arrogance and stuff like that, that had a lot to do with it.
Right.
My identity as a football player, not as who I am.
Right. Yeah. I think that would be tough for anybody to be in that position and not wrestle with ego and pride and arrogance.
Another one is, your ego is not your amigo.
Yeah, that's cute. Your ego is not your amigo. That's a good one. Do you have a regular self-care practice? And by that, I'm thinking, do you like attend a certain number of meetings a week, or do you have like a morning ritual? What does that look like for you?
So for me, go to church on Sundays. I'm definitely not like the poster child for recovery, right? I'm not hitting 7 meetings a week. I'm not going on what I mean? Like when my first 3 years, up until COVID, 5 to 7 meetings a week, I was going consistently, going to church on Sundays. I shouldn't say my excuse was COVID, right? So during COVID, it was like I was doing Zoom. I did a lot of H&Is during COVID. That was a really cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to do more of those. I go to, 1 meeting a week, 2 meetings a week. I go to church on Sundays as well. But for me, I did have a 2-year commitment of the secretary for our local softball league that we have here. So it's 15 teams, all people in sobriety. So
Sober league.
So prep in the fields, it's every single Sunday. We do 3 seasons a year, prep the field, there's a board, so I have to deal with them. So it's a pretty, developed schedules. If there's a rain out of some sort, and then there's playoffs, and then we have our own local tournaments as well that I would help run. So I did that for 2 years, and a lot of fun. So I do a lot of softball. That's kind of my get down.
I'm sure everybody wants you on their team. You're like the slugger. It's
It's a
nice to
lot of
be
fun.
needed. It's
Yeah.
nice to be needed. That's awesome. Do you have a spiritual experience story you can share, whether it's defining what it means for you, or maybe there was a situation that made you feel like there was a presence of God in your life?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in like a Christian household, right? So like my grandma raised me due to some family issues that I had. And she had started a Christian daycare, and she ended up remarrying, and then that grandfather had started a church, and it's now a really big church in Richmond, California. And it's, so I've always known that there's like the presence of God in my life, but I grew to have a resentment towards God. And a lot of that had to do with, why would God bring me into a certain household? Or I grew up in a predominantly wealthy community in Napa, and my family was blue collar, like they worked hard. And, in that community, we were poor. So like I got made fun of, right? I was just like short, stocky, fat kid growing up. So I got made fun of, like, why would God develop me into that? Now I understand why. But at the time when I couldn't see 2 feet in front of my face, I had this resentment towards God. And so, I went to church with my brother-in-law at this small church that my friend Jesse is the pastor at. And, it's just one of those experiences where you're sitting there, and I was loaded, and like, I felt like God was speaking with me, right? And I'm sitting there crying the whole entire service. I'm crying. And, the next day I ended up checking into treatment. And oddly enough, the person that I called had sent me to an all men's faith-based program. So it was kind of like, that wasn't what I was looking for. But at that point I had literally tried everything. I had gone to 5 other treatment centers, all different types of things, right? Holistic. I've tried multiple things, 12-step, celebrate recovery. I've tried so many things, and I'm like, I need to figure this out, and that's what kept on driving me is seeing people at speaker meetings, like if they can get it, I can get it eventually, right? There's just some things that I have to work through. And then I went to this all men's faith-based treatment center. It's on 160 acres in the middle of San Diego, generators and water, 6 people in one room. You got to walk, it's like 200 yards from the top of the bunkhouse down to the main living area. What you see is what they have for food is what you get. It was very different than all the other places that I had been. And for me, it's going to church there and realizing that this is the first. We go to the Rock here in San Diego, and that's the first service that I've gone to since the last one, and just kind of hearing the same message. And I'm like, me realizing that God is placing me here, and this is where I'm supposed to be, and talking to the people that work there, because I just got there, and I've forgotten how to pray. So I'm like, hey, I need to figure this out. And so them teaching me how to pray, showing how to pray, what to, things to talk to God about. And for me, once having talked to God and started praying, just seeing things, my life genuinely get better. Whether that's physically and emotionally. I had a lot of extra baggage on the side that, I knew wasn't going to get better right away. But just putting my faith in him. And then the second that I started praying, my life, all my prayers started getting answered slowly, and my life started getting better. So it wasn't like, I didn't have that aha moment. People talk about the aha moment in meetings. I didn't like have this big extravagant, like, oh my God, it was just one of those things where, I had lost trust in God. I had no resentments towards him. And so when, some people are like, oh, you'll get a sign from God, right? And you look outside and the wind's blowing, and you're like, oh, there it is, and that's not necessarily the sign that they're, talking about. I guess it can be, but, seeing these little signs, and that was it for me. And I'm like, okay, if I do this, if I pray for something so small and he answers it, I'm like, let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. And my life has gotten exponentially better.
There really is something magical about prayer. I was just listening to I think it was Steve Harvey. It was like prayer changes things. And I had kind of gotten away from that. I'm in long-term sobriety, and it's easy to, things ebb and flow. It's hard to stay plugged in all the time. And I was sort of in that, ebbing place where, just not feeling it. But I thank you for reminding me that, yeah, prayer changes things. And it's not the burning bush or a lightning bolt or anything like that. It's subtle and it's quiet. There's this idea that the ego speaks first and the ego speaks loudest. And so, that saying, be still and know that I am God. It's in the stillness that I get those little, shifts in energy and in my heart that sort of reconnect me back to hope. And I love that you shared that. Sometimes we do need to go relearn how to talk to God and pray, and because life throws a bunch of stuff at us, it's not always easy to roll with it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's, one thing I love about going to meetings is you can go to a meeting at any point in time and learn something new from anybody. Right?
Anybody.
I was at a meeting, I guess it was probably about 6 months ago, and a newcomer of all things, right? Like
It's always a newcomer.
And the newcomer stands up there and he says, and he's probably got like 28 days, 29 days. And he stands up there and he's basically talking about how his higher power has saved him. And he's like, at this point, he goes, because I didn't think it would happen. He goes, find me somebody whose life got worse because they found God. I'm sitting there thinking, and I was like, busted out my phone, put it in my notes, and and I was like, man, because there's having been to a faith-based treatment center. I was up there for 4 months, and then I ended up working there and living there for a year, because that's what I needed. Like I said, I've gone to 6 treatment centers in 1 year.
Wow.
The last one being 4 months. And so much like the people that went there who were frustrated because they're like, I'm at an all men's faith-based program. I wanted to go to a co-ed non-12-step place, you know what I mean? That allows you to have your cell phone, that allows you to take have passes whenever you want,
Yeah.
And so that's a line that I'm like, man, I wish at the time that I knew that.
Yeah.
Because consistently there was situations where I could have brought that up, and much like me is like, at that point, like, what did I have to lose? I
Right.
literally lost everything.
Yeah.
Except the 2 garbage bags that I had.
Yeah, I was kind of giggling when you said you had a bag of clothes and a bag of shoes, and I thought, oh, you probably have big feet. You probably need
Yeah, size 15. Yeah.
two pairs of shoes. It needs its own bag. I get it. No, that's really profound. I mean, when we're at that place where we've lost it all, it's like you really have nothing to lose at that point. And that's when sort of the armor comes off, and we're willing to, I had that same experience, willing to try things I had previously abandoned or rejected.
Yep. No, definitely.
Gift of desperation, I suppose. And it's so interesting that you stayed there for so long, because a lot of times people go into treatment and then they get thrown right back in to their environment that made them sick in the first place. So was that uncommon for you to, like, you went to all those other treatment centers? Were they short? I guess if you did 6 in a year, they were short periods of time.
30 days. I'd gone for 30 days. I did the longest period of time I had in that year was 50 days. The shortest relapse, not the shortest relapse, but the shortest amount of sobriety time I had was, or the time in between treatment and a relapse. The shortest one was about 3 minutes. And then the longest one was outside of treatment was 20 days.
Wow.
So the 30 days from what I found is the easy part, right? It's once you leave the treatment center, once you leave the facility, that's kind of when life happens, right? Because you get thrust, you're in this shell when you're in treatment.
Right.
But the second you get out of there, life happens, life goes on after, even though you're in treatment, life still goes on.
Yeah.
So I'm like, at that point, I'm staying as long as I can, as long as they're going to have me. Luckily enough, I've been there long enough. I kind of learned everything. They had me as a tech, making minimum wage, and they had a double wide trailer that I was staying on.
Wow, that's different.
But I loved it. It was,
Yeah.
I was so appreciative of it. It literally changed my whole perspective on life. I didn't need $1 million home in Napa. I didn't need the fancy cars, the lifted trucks, anything like that. It was, luckily my mother-in-law sold me a car that I'd purchased when I first got in the NFL. It was, an Acura MDX. They let me buy it for $1,000. The thing was a beater, but I loved it. I lived in a double wide trailer. I lived in a double wide trailer on a dirt farm. So it drove an Acura, and then, it
You were
was
happy.
30 minutes away from civilization. The facility I was at, if you wanted to leave, you had to walk, and it's 10 miles in each direction to the next town.
Wow.
So that's just what I needed.
That's just what you needed. Isn't that amazing? Like when we're really ready, we end up getting exactly what we need.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I want to go back a little bit to sort of how we got here. I'm endlessly fascinated by the, family of origin, like what your parents did for a living. It sounds like you were raised by your grandmother and had, a grandfather that was a good influence in your life, but it's those early experiences that sort of set the stage for the rest of our lives. So you can share whatever you want. But how did we get here? It's not why the addiction, it's like, why the pain? I'm just like, how old were you when you started drinking?
So I have kind of a different experience. God, what was it? I have a brother that's 2 years older, right?
Mhm.
And so, like, I can remember as a young kid, my older brother and his friends would have me go to the Safeway, right? And in Napa at the time, there was probably like 2 grocery stores, right? There's Valerga's and Safeway. And it's back in the day when they used to stick the cigarettes like out in the open. And so they'd be like, hey, go steal a pack of cigarettes, right? And I'd run over there, go grab a pack of cigarettes, take off. Or, hey, let's go to, I can't remember the name of the market, A1 market or the economy market. That's what it was. And like, I'd go in there and steal a Mickey 40s. And we would like go to the creek behind Phillips Elementary School, right? And then we take a swig and be like, oh, this is cool. And then you like stick it down on the ground. And then you come back a week later and you each come back and take a few pulls of it. So I was,
Ew.
the
How old were you when that was going on?
Right. It was like my family didn't care. As long as the streetlights came on, I was on my way home or I was home, right? It's kind of a different era than what we live in now.
Yeah.
So like, that's the way. They didn't care what we did, me and my older brother. So we got into a lot of trouble in that aspect. But I'd kind of seen what drugs and alcohol had done to my family. And like I said, I had an older brother. I sat there and watched him play Pop Warner football for 2 years. My grandmother said when I was a baby, when they would turn off Monday Night Football, I would start crying. So like, legitimately from the time I was 8 years old, I was like, I'm going to be a professional football player. And I knew it, right? It's kind of a weird mindset. And so I wasn't going to let anything do that to stop me. My wife she was an athlete. She played catch. She was a catcher for softball at the University of Georgia. So we both had the same things in mind. We both wanted to go to college. We both wanted to be the best that we could be. So I never, I think, went to one party in high school. Didn't really drink at that party. Her family had we had like 4 friends over and they bought some beers. And so like we had like a get together at their house
And the parents knew you were drinking?
Yeah. So
Okay.
we were 18.
Okay.
My first experience with weed, my brother was, like to smoke weed. He's 2 years older than me. And I'm like, hey, I want to smoke weed. And he's like, okay, dude. And he threw a gas mask on me and from this day, I still don't like weed. I've never in when
What do
I
you
was
mean what do you mean he threw a gas mask on you?
like a gas mask and then I hook it up to a bong and then it's
Oh,
so like
and you didn't like it? That's
no,
weird.
no, no,
That's
no, definitely
weird.
didn't like it. Definitely didn't like it. Like when I tell you I've had more bad trips off weed than any other drug that I've ever done, it's the truth by far.
Okay.
So, but like I said, I was very determined that I wasn't, like I was so focused that I didn't want anything to ruin that.
Right.
So once I started to like looking back at it now, when I was in junior college, I started to drink a little bit more of a social thing. And realizing, like I said, looking back on it now, I did it because I have social anxiety around a lot of people, like a small group of people, or just talking one-on-one. I'm like an outgoing person, but I like to get out of my shell. And so like having a few years, you start talking a little bit. So looking back on it now, I realize in junior college, that's why I would do that. And then I went to Berkeley for college. So being around the team, these are all new people. And what do young college people do to get together and get to know each other? They start drinking, right?
Yeah.
And I'd had multiple surgeries, in college. And then my first few years in the NFL, and I hated prescription pain medication, couldn't stand it. So
what were you having surgeries from? Injuries from football?
Yeah.
What kind of injuries were you sustaining?
So I've had multiple shoulder surgeries. When I was younger, I had a staph infection that had me in the hospital for a week.
Oh, that's really dangerous.
So yeah, so multiple things like that.
Okay.
And at the time, I couldn't stand pain medication. Would take it, throw up, absolutely hated it. Which would eventually be my demise. Prescription pain medication.
But it went from like Valium or codeine to eventually like when Oxy hit the market, that really.
Yeah, I mean, it's my second year in Seattle. So my second year in Seattle, which was my third year overall, I had a subluxation of my hip, right? Which means your hip joint pops out and then it pops back in.
Oh my God.
So I'd had like a broken bone in my back in college that I had epidurals for, but never got, had surgery for them and never got fixed. But with that, it was, the team had prescribed me, 30 pills of prescription pain medication every month. Right. And, just Vicodin. And I was taking it as prescribed, like, I'm not going to say that they knowingly gave it to me and intended on me becoming addicted to it. Right. But
right. That's standard protocol, right?
Right. It's like they give it to you and then you take it over a long period of time. And then I went home during the off season, said, hey, to my doctor, like these guys are giving it to me. And then I wanted to get off it. And, what I now know is dope sick.
Yeah.
Because, after a few months of taking it, right, I'm saying it's not working anymore. So like, okay, we'll take 2 of them at a time.
Take more.
And, yeah. And so eventually that transitioned to Oxycontin, which not that they were giving me, because I was taking what they were giving me and buying that stuff on the street as well.
On the street. Yeah. That's rough, dude. Yeah. So it really wasn't the alcohol that was a problem for you. What kind of sent you over the edge was the addiction to pain medication. Gosh, I have interviewed so many people. Man, I interviewed this one guy who was like an intern at the White House under the Clinton administration and went hiking one day and broke his ankle and within a very short amount of time, he was on heroin and homeless. Like the whole Oxy thing has just really done a number on our country.
Yeah. And I think they're doing a little bit better of a job in regards to doctors. The one thing that I am not a fan of is, since this has kind of been brought up and it's been more, I guess, prevalent today in society, what I've noticed working in the treatment field is a lot more doctors are cutting their clients off. And
like in a healthy way or
like a non-healthy way. It's like you're taking too many of them, right? It's like, I can't be prescribing you any more of these, right? And so we're either going to cut you down in terms of how many you get, or they just completely stop them in general. and these are
And
pain management.
pain management clinics.
Yeah.
So it's considered not responsible because then they switch to heroin.
Yeah. I mean, because they have a lack of a game plan for the client.
Right.
It's like, okay, hey, we're going to slowly taper you off this, right? Or we're going to prescribe other medications that treatment centers use to help you get off of this that
Right.
also do help with pain. So they basically set them up for failure, right? So they start going through precipitated withdrawals. And, I know for me, it was like, alcohol and benzodiazepines like Xanax. Well, you'll die from those in detox, right?
Right. Right.
I tell people all the time, I said, but heroin withdrawals, they'll make you want to kill yourself. It's just, that's how bad they are, both physically and psychologically.
Right. Right. So, you play for how many years?
So I played 6 years.
Okay, 6 years. And during that period of time, you were healthy, you had some pain management stuff, but nothing out of the ordinary. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And then it was when did, like, at what point in your career did you recognize that you were dependent?
Pretty quick. So the situation that I had was, so we had a lockout, right? Which means we weren't allowed in the facilities and the team wasn't allowed to have contact with us due to the collective bargaining agreement, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's this whole argument between the higher ups and the players, essentially. And during that lockout, we couldn't talk to the doctors. So I had to go to my own personal doctor and get a prescription for it. Because at that time, I knew I went to the emergency room because I thought I had the flu. And this was when I first initially tried to stop. And it was after probably 6 months, 7 months of taking it throughout the whole season.
Wow.
And
throughout the entire season?
Yeah, throughout like training camp all the way through the season. I've been taking it as prescribed.
But daily.
What's that?
But daily.
Daily, 3 times a day.
Oh my gosh.
It was like, okay, this isn't working. They're like, okay, we'll take 10 mil, just take 2 at a time now. So it wasn't a crazy large amount at all. And went home during the off season, was like, hey, I need to get off this, right? So I stopped taking them. And I'm like, man, I'm sick. I got the flu. So I go to the emergency room, looks at your chart. He's like, how long have you been taking these? And I'm like, well, I've been taking it for about 6-7 months due to an injury. And that's the doctor's like, I think you're chemically dependent to opiates. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And he's like, you need to see your primary care physician. He's wrote me a prescription for 30 more right then and there. And so I can go to there, get it filled. I took it, felt better right away. Went to my primary care doctor, took it same day. Wasn't really abusing them at the time. Maybe one extra every now and again. And so boom, the lockout ends. And at that point, once the lockout had ended, we got basically a plane ticket to go straight to our team. And so I went to the team, I went directly to them, handed them my prescription and said, hey, this is, my doctor's writing it. Cool, no problem. And bam, I get drug tested the next day. You get a FedEx in the mail saying that you failed that drug test and that I was in the drug program. And I'm like, but why?
In the drug program within NFL? They have a drug program?
Yes, they do. So you get tested 5 times a month, all randomly. And if you fail it a second time, then that's when you get suspended.
But they're prescribing you the medication.
Correct. So this is what happened, right? So what had happened is the prescription that my doctor had written me was a 30-day prescription. Mm-hmm. This is no joke. I literally got tested on day 31.
And you had more pills still?
Yeah. So basically it was that transition period between when my personal doctor was writing it and the team was writing it.
Okay.
So there was that small period where it was 31 days. So they look at that as abuse. So I got thrown in the drug program. And I was able to stop. But here's where like the phenomenon of craving came in.
Yeah.
It's like I was able to stop. I had a little bit of withdrawal symptoms, but once again, I was playing every single day. I was practicing. I was sweating it out pretty easily. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Couldn't Couldn't stop thinking about it. And so I was in that program for about 2 months. And then during my appeal process, so I had to have my doctor from back home write it and do all these different, write to the NFL and all this other nonsense. My agent was helping out with it a lot. And so I get a FedEx in the mail saying you're out of the drug program, right? Hooray. Yes. Love it. And so I'm sitting there. All I can think about for the last 2 months is this, right? I have a significant other who's doing it every single day. I have a housemate. We have this big house in Seattle, and I have a roommate that's doing it my wife, and then my housemate's doing it. And so second I got that FedEx, I went over to my housemate and I said, hey, where are they at? And he goes, there's a little blue, you'll see a pill bottle. And he's like, just grab one of the blue ones and take it. I took it, threw up all over the place. And from there, it was off to the races. And by my last year, while playing, I was taking 30s a day. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And did you end your career with the Seahawks?
With the Arizona Cardinals.
And what year was that? What was your last year?
2014.
2014 was last year. What was that year like? I would imagine. Okay, so this is where we kind of get into, you work your whole life to be in this position. It's an elite position. Your identity must be wrapped around this idea of NFL football player, elite athlete. How hard was it to let go of? Like, what was like the detangling process, like unpacking all that like?
Well, I didn't really get to unpack it for, I would say the next year and a half. The second, I had this whole thing where people that had done far less than I did in their career were making twice as much money as me. And so that's why I ended up leaving football, ended up stepping away from football. I was tired of getting my butt kicked on a daily basis and
literally
performing, right. And doing good and not getting the reward of doing so. Right. And
is that political?
I think so. I think a little bit of it is, there at the very same time, there may have been, I was known as the guy who liked to go hang out with, like, all my friends each team I was with liked to go out and have fun. And no matter what team you're at, what city you're in, the team knows what you're doing, knows what's going on. At the time for me, it was just alcohol. And just the one time that I was in the drug program. Which is supposed to be, confidential, private and confidential, but
it's not.
It's simple when they show up to the facility and you're getting tested 5 times a month as opposed to everybody else once a month, maybe.
So they considered you a higher risk?
Yeah, probably. So basically when I transitioned after that, I've been going on ride-alongs for the last few years before that with the sheriff's department in Napa County. They're like, hey, why don't you come work for us when you retire? And I'm like, oh, cool. That sounds like fun. And so I went to the police academy literally within maybe 2 months after retiring. I went to the police academy, was class president, and did that for a short amount of time until I ended up getting in trouble and having to resign.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about that, but I want to backtrack a little bit to the letting go of something that you loved, and because it sounds like, so it's my understanding. I mean, I remember being a Pop Warner cheerleader when I was 10 years old, right? That is something that they start you. Football is like a lifestyle. It's like it's like a religion, right? And you're indoctrinated when you're little, and you do it your entire life with this goal of playing for the NFL. But what is do they prepare you for when it's time to let it go? I mean, I know NFL stands for like not for long, as they say, but do they prepare you at all?
I think maybe they do things to help prepare you a little bit financially, but they do absolutely nothing, in my opinion, to prepare you emotionally. I think that's where a lot of people, I think that's where the NFL falls short.
That's just heartbreaking, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's where.
I imagine there's so much heartache in letting that go.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you're the I have friends that are still highly involved, whether it's through coaching, through other avenues. And I also have friends that are not involved at all. I like to go to games. I have people that I can still reach out to, still contact, but there's no them contacting me. My friends do, but the organization doesn't contact you to check on you, see how you're doing. It's once you're done, kind of out of sight, out of mind. A lot of people, not only in the football world, but in your personal life as well. People that you thought were friends, now all of a sudden you're retired, and you can't do anything for them anymore. They're not reaching out to you to check.
That's gotta be heartbreaking.
So that was like the biggest thing for me. Going and playing the Niners at the Stick, right? Which is like something I always wanted. And buying 100 tickets and passing them out to people.
Yeah.
And to be honest, maybe the people and maybe it's my fault, I don't really know, but to people that I speak to this day that went to that game, it's probably 4 or 5.
Right.
So, and maybe, I don't think that I did anything to directly, actually, I know I didn't do anything to directly affect them in any way, shape, or form, like during my addiction. So that was like a big, hard thing for me to swallow. It was like, all these people love me for what I did and who I was. And now all of a sudden, when I need them, they weren't there for me. That's how I felt initially.
Yeah, no, that's understandable.
Yeah. I think now it was like, well, maybe it was me, maybe it was something I did, I may be sober, but I'm still a little, I'm still sick.
Still human. That's not sick.
Yeah, right?
It's just human. It's so, I think a lot of recovery is about learning to recover your true self. And as we recover our true self, people relate to us differently, right? Like redefining your identity as a sober person, that's a thing.
Yeah.
Like that's a big deal. And so I just imagine, outside looking in, I would imagine that you doubly had to like deconstruct, because there's this had a lot of energy and visibility and people valuing you and loving on you and stuff. And then when the identity changes to regular human, then I think the loss would leave a big gap as to opposed to, we all feel the pain of disconnection, but gosh, the contrast and the distance from NFL to regular amazing guy, but still, that's hard.
I felt like that was a time that I needed people most.
Yeah.
And it was, and that's what I struggled with, the identity of, I've been playing this game since I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
I had done something at my high school that only 2 other people have done, and it's 100+ year history.
That's amazing.
It was, I think a lot of that I think some of it had to do with the socioeconomic status of my area,
Yeah.
I try to explain it to people in that, but it's if you're part of the, I'm a Gibson, right? That's my last name. I'll always be a part of the lower end of Napa, no matter how extravagant I try to be. I could have the biggest, baddest house in Napa, but I'd still be a Gibson, if that makes sense.
Sure. In your mind. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, it's just a different, it's different. It was a struggle for sure. And I think that me having to, what ultimately helped me was getting out of Napa, having people that genuinely didn't care who I was or what I did. All they cared about me was getting clean and getting sober.
Yeah.
And accepting me for that person, and loving on me for that person.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest thing for me. When I meet people now, the last thing I tell them is that I played football.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of experiences where people in particular, they network with me, or they want to get to know me because of what I did, not because who I was as a person.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit more guarded like that now.
That's fair. Yeah. This is like a deep existential question, but how has your identity changed? Who are you now?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just Mike the person,
Yeah.
it's that simple. Uh,
Yeah.
as opposed to that life, Mike the football player was so complicated.
Yeah.
There's a book that I've heard of and I've read parts of. It's called like The Millionaire Next Door. It's just
Oh
about
yeah.
just like living a basic, simple life, right? And it's like
Yeah.
driving a car until the wheels fall off, and there's you always like these are just vessels that we drive into, like having a fancy car. Like I drive a Nissan car, you know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah.
I drive it for work. I got to drive a lot, and so
Yeah.
having a car that has good gas mileage and reliable, right? It's
Yeah.
um those simple things. Like I'm just literally Mike the person.
Do you feel like your values have changed from, maybe shifting from external validation to internal validation, but really honoring the values that you have now as opposed to what you can do to perform?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think a lot of that is just living in gratitude, right?
Hmm.
I think a lot of it is being grateful for the things that I do have, and dialectical behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. Like I still have those issues, but values of just being accountable.
Hmm.
Being accountable, if that's paying taxes, that's paying your registration,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Like I hated doing that.
Oh,
But
the adulting. It's no
I
fun.
know it sucks so bad, doesn't
I
it?
hate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But grateful we can do it, right?
Yeah. See, that's what I gotta tell myself.
Backtrack.
I'm grateful that I have a good job that affords me the opportunity to pay for this thing. And you're like,
Yeah.
you're right.
So funny. It's so interesting. You're talking about The Millionaire Next Door. That book, I love that book, by the way, because it speaks to amassing wealth as opposed to displaying it. Right. And so if that at its essence is about internal validation as opposed to external, right? And as a woman, your value is based on your external. Oddly enough, here's a funny little side story. When you go into your 40s and 50s, you become invisible, which is a great time to start shoplifting. No,
Right.
not shoplifting. But there is an autonomy that happens, and I see women in my peer group turn to valuing internal values. I know you to be a man of service. Service is something that's important to me. Practicing gratitude, staying humble. Step 7 is like my favorite step because it's all about humility and being right-sized, and because I think it's so easy in our society to forget what's really important. It's so easy to get swept up in social media and how am I performing? And do you struggle with social media and that kind of stuff as much anymore? Or do you feel like you've gotten some distance from it?
Yeah. I mean, it's more of like social media for me is more around like my recreational activities. But
Softball.
there's still stuff I struggle with, it's not, social media in general, right? You're talking about internalizing things and externalizing things. There's a lot of people that I know that are doing so great on social media, right? But in life,
It's all smoke and mirrors, let me tell you.
yeah, exactly. And you see videos about how individuals look, right? And then like I struggled with body dysmorphia for a long time.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. So it's like,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can I ask you, is that, because I don't usually get men admitting that they have body dysmorphia. Is it like being not big enough?
no, just being too big. I've been
Being
big my whole
too,
life. Yeah.
you're 6'5"
Yeah.
currently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
270 pounds, and
Yeah.
I looked my best when I was shooting heroin and meth and I was 210 pounds.
But were you linebacker?
No, I was an offensive lineman. I was
Offense. Oh, okay.
I have 310 pounds when I was playing. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've always been like the strongest person on the team. I've always been like, I work out every day. I still work out every day, but more so for my mental health instead of
Right.
strength. But I still have the bench record at Cal. I still have the vertical record for lineman at Cal. Like I have all these records for working out at Cal. But a lot of that was because, I mean, you look at pictures, man, when I was a young kid, I was short and stocky and, the time that I was like 215 pounds as an eighth grader. And then in my freshman year,
Oh my
right?
God. Were you tall
No,
then?
I'm short. I was like
You're so
5'10",
short.
and then I grew between my freshman and my sophomore year of high school. I grew from like 5'11" to 6'3". So
Wow.
in literally a matter of 4 or 5 months, and then I went from 215 to 195, and then it was like 240 pounds, 285, 300 pounds. So I was kind of a late bloomer in that aspect.
But in your when you were at the height of your professional career, 310 pounds, did you feel too big then? Or that was when it was okay?
No, I mean, it was generally okay. When I was first with the Eagles, they wanted me to be like 340 pounds. And I'm like,
340?
I'm like, I can't eat enough food. Like it was a weird thing, right? In college, I was like 295 to 305. And so that part was like uncomfortable. Like it was like, I can't eat that much food. It's impossible. And I didn't want to do it. I didn't like the way I looked. I didn't like the way that it made me feel. And then going to Seattle, they ran a different offense. So I was able to be, more mobile.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's easy to, like, I would start the season at 305, 310. And by the end of the season, I'm 290 pounds just from
a sheer exercise.
Yeah, just from exercise and not being able to consume enough calories in the day.
Wow. So where does the body dysmorphia play in? Is it afterwards, or was it when you were a little kid?
From when I was a little kid to when I was playing to when I'm.
Oh, just always.
Yeah. I mean, it's
always in the back of your mind. Your size is just ever present.
Yeah.
You are kind of a imposing
Yeah.
presence.
I mean, I get it in an airplane. People are like, man, I love you big. I said, you ever try riding in an airplane?
There's a guy on TikTok that's like,
it has its pluses and minuses, right?
Yeah. There's a guy on TikTok who's like 6'9", and so his whole TikTok account is about like him trying to fit into small places, just like everyday places, the grocery store, a cab.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, he's even taller than me, and a lot of it's not necessarily generalized around my height. It's more around my weight.
Yeah. Yeah, that's hard. Okay, so we talked a little bit how you had to go to a bunch of different rehabs. Do you feel like, in my experience, there isn't always like one thing that helps people get sober? It seems like the rehabs, like all along the path, people are like planting seeds, and at some point you just kind of tip the scales. But did you have like a moment of clarity, or a moment that you were like, this is it, I'm never going to drink again, or I need to get help, or I'm going to stop forever? Was there like a specific moment, or was it that quiet spiritual experience you were saying before?
No, I think for me, it was, for me, it's the steps, finding a sponsor. The program that I went through, the employees that work there sponsor the clients there. Like you have to find a sponsor. So, and I had gone to every single nice guy that I had gone to that worked there, and they kept on telling me no. And they're like, dude, get the hint. You see the guy that's working in the kitchen. And I'm like, that fool? He's got tattoos on his neck. He's got 2 teeth. They're fixed now. You know what I mean? Like, he's been to prison. I haven't, right? So like, how can that guy help me?
Right.
He's from Hemet, California. I'm from Napa, California. I'm from a affluent community. He's from what's not an affluent community, right? I'm like, how can that guy help me? So talking about like terminal uniqueness and stuff like that, right? So,
yeah, that's where it came in, huh? You were like, but did you have the mindset of no one's going to understand my specific situation?
I had that from the first treatment center that I ever went to.
Mm-hmm.
The very first treatment center that I ever went to, there wasn't anybody that has gone through what I've done. I had never met somebody who'd gone to treatment for that. Zero. So, that was one thing that, like, how can these people relate to me? I'd sit there in groups and be like, this person don't know what I've been through, when it's look through the similarities, not the differences, what I now know. or
Mhm.
let me rephrase, what I now understand.
Right.
I knew it back then.
Right. But you didn't have it in your
I heard
heart.
it, but I wasn't listening, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, just going through the steps, is like, it's another one of those things where I'm like, I gotta try everything. I gotta go through this fourth step. I'd always gotten to the fourth step, never actually completed it.
Mm.
And just going through the fourth step,
What did you learn about yourself on the 4th step?
that I wasn't arrogant, an a-hole. It's very, it's a very, the 12 steps kind of tear you down, pick you back up type thing, and realizing things about myself that I didn't think were really true. I thought I was a humble person,
Oh.
and I thought that I was a generous person, but there was always this like ulterior motive behind everything.
Mm.
In terms of generosity, right? And then in terms of being humble, is like I definitely was not humble. Um, but just it's that experience was crazy. And then, sharing it with somebody else, sharing things that I'd never shared with anybody, and
Mhm.
having that person like totally understand and saying, dude, I've gone through those same things. I've done this, I've done that. We may be different, but we're really the same.
Yeah.
And just the freedom of knowing that, and then going to make amends, and which is like still to this day the most brutal thing ever. um
So hard. So
yeah,
hard.
I was on a softball field, and the owner of the place that I worked for, he said something being a smart ass, and I was like, shut the F up, and at the end of it I like called him, and I'm like, hey, it's like, I don't
Sorry.
want to call him, right? And so I like, hey man, dude, I said that, I shouldn't have, I was wrong, what can I do to make it right? And he's like, what are you talking about? He didn't even hear it.
Oh, damn
So you're
it.
like making these amends, what I mean? Like and a lot of it is, making a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah.
I struggled with that too. Uh,
Yeah.
it's going to make amends, and a lot of the times, majority of the people just wanted to see me happy, see me sober.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, the 12 steps, they work. I've tried every theory, and Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. I've tried to prove every single one of them wrong, and they work, dude.
I
It becomes
know.
annoying how the cliches of these programs and how they work, and
Yeah.
they do.
Yeah. I had somebody over the last couple of days tell me that, it wasn't going to work for him. And I wanted to say some things to him, but I felt like it was just going to be throwing pebbles at a suit of armor. And so I know, listen, if nobody's asking me for my opinion, I know now not to give it. Ah,
Yep.
so hard.
Yep.
So hard. I got a lot to say about it, but there is like this, they talk about the gift of desperation, which it sounds like you had too. And
Mhm.
that does break down the armor pretty
Yeah,
significantly.
no, definitely. It's the gift that's something that I pray for with people that I know that are struggling, uh,
Yeah.
is that they do have the gift of desperation, and I can be a little bit brutal. I had somebody that I knew come into treatment down here, and I was getting him into treatment, and he's like, I just feel like, I feel like death. I feel so bad. And I said, good.
Yeah.
I want you to feel that.
Yeah. Don't forget.
Yeah, because you'll never forget it.
Yeah.
God willing. But I mean, I still remember it. I still see it on a daily basis. That's kind of the
How
working.
does I want to ask you about that. So it's, when you're talking about, one meeting a week or whatever, you're in the business. And when you're in the business, you're doing a lot of service work, and you're, being refreshed with the information all the time. Right. And so I have a similar experience. When somebody comes in and they are, I bet, do you get those people who are like, I just want to do it on my own, or I'm just doing this to get someone off my back. I'll do it on my own. I think you and I, being in the business, you kind of recognize that is a trauma response.
Yeah.
And it's hard to, fierce independence is a response to trauma. People get locked in these survival modes, and it's really hard to break through. And you said something, but you used the word brutal, and I think that's such an interesting, it's, I don't even know when, like, I tend to be like the softer, gentler way. Like but I know men sometimes hear like the harsh words like are impactful. How do you know when to be direct and confronting and when to be, soft and gentle?
Yeah, I mean, I deal with the clients in general, when either their family makes that first initial phone call or from
Mm,
when the client makes the actual phone call.
mhm,
And I deal with them throughout the whole entire process. So you kind of get a feeling for the character, the person, right? The client, when you're sitting there talking to them and the character of that person, you can find out a lot about their past and what they've been through. And it's a fine line that you do have to walk,
mhm.
because sometimes there is a lot of trauma. It's hard because like me being manipulating in my addiction, right? Like I have to become a manipulating in my
It's a defect that turns into an
right,
asset.
right. So it's like you do have to
Yes.
manipulate them a little bit to stay, right? Like because
Yeah.
the reality of it is sure I'm spitting truth,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
the reality of it is like, hey,
You want
dude,
them to stay.
yeah, you're the only place you have left is the homeless shelter, man.
Yeah.
You can go to the homeless shelter. That's going to be your job. I'm manipulating them right then and there, but I'm speaking the truth, right? Because I'm using that as a technique to not get them to leave because they have no.
Right. You want them to stay. Yeah.
So it's like, look, your family's not helping you out. There's nobody that's helping you out. It's the truth.
Yeah.
So, like, I'll take you to the homeless shelter, right? So there's your manipulative tactic, right? So it's like one of my character defects. We use that to help them. Uh,
Yeah.
but it's like the reality of it is I try to be as truthful with them as possible.
Right.
I think that people tend to respect the truth more than like the manipulating side of it.
Right. I guess it's all about motives.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So for me, if like I said, people respect the truth, they want to hear the truth. I know when I was in treatment and people were BSing me, it was like the last thing I wanted to hear. Uh,
Yeah.
my sponsor is 100% truthful with me. I want to punch him in his face sometimes. I like that's what I
Ooh,
respect.
he's
Maybe not at
brave.
the time I don't appreciate it or respect it, but in the long
Yeah.
term, I end up appreciating it.
Yeah. There's that saying, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a reason why they call the truth brutal, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, they say that honesty, I don't know who all these they people are, but I kind of subscribe to the honesty without compassion is cruelty, and I don't want to be cruel, but sometimes it's important to position the hard truth in order to help them. So I guess maybe it's about motive. Plus, and I recognize that you probably have to do a lot of your own work to stay clear so that you're not responding from a triggered place. You're
yes.
responding from the healed place of your goal is to help them get recovery. You're not mad at them or trying to force something down their throat.
Yeah, and 100%, 100%. I think working in my line of work, I think people lose sight of why we do this in the first place,
Yeah.
and the reason why we're doing it is to help the client.
Yeah.
So I think like I said, there's people that just lose sight of it, and it's hard to see sometimes. Like it's easy to see, but it's hard to watch, um,
Yeah.
because the client's always first.
Yeah.
I mean, if the client wants to go to another program that's going to better suit them, cool. What can I do to help you?
Right.
Let's help you get there. Let's make this work, as opposed to, um, you know,
I think you should stay here.
stay at your facility, right? Because I think
Yeah.
for obvious reasons, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of amazing treatment centers out there, but there's a lot of bad people in treatment.
Yeah.
Look at it for the financial gain of it.
Right. Right. You need to be careful. Listen, what I want to be sure that people have a way to connect with you. I feel like you're doing really good service work, and I feel like you're one of those people who are coming from that pure motive of wanting to help alleviate suffering. That's the first thing I ask somebody when considering a guest is, what is your intention? And I immediately knew that you and I were in alignment. And I want people to be able to, how can people get a hold of you or learn more about the work that you do?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook. You can look me up, Mike Gibson. I'm also on Instagram. So at mike.gibson69, I believe. Still locked out of my Twitter. I had my often like changed out all my passwords, and so that because
So
people
funny.
place things right, old people
Yeah.
reach out to me. So
You're on LinkedIn as well.
yeah, LinkedIn as well.
You're currently with mental health and it's a solution-based treatment and detox in the San Diego area. What's it called?
So solution-based treatment is in Temecula. It's a great program that I used to work for.
Oh, okay.
I currently work for the Mental Health Center of San Diego.
Of San Diego. Oh, okay. Okay.
So
Mental Health Center of San Diego. Awesome. Because that's where you live. You're in the San Diego area.
Yeah. So mhcsandiego.com. It's a primary mental health facility. And then Healthy Life Recovery is a substance abuse facility that I do work for. So you can look them up at healthyliferecovery.com.
healthyliferecovery.com. Awesome. If you're driving and listening to this, I'll have everything in the show notes. And Mike, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. It was such a pleasure to talk to you. I really appreciate your transparency and all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I appreciate you very much.
Great. Well, you have a great day. We'll talk soon.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks.